What school curriculum fails to teach us? Part 1. How to get out of our own way. What we're going to cover in Part 1 of the series are the following. The right attitude we're going to need from a psychological standpoint, removing harmful habits or preventing them, removing bias through dissociation, and how to deal with disappointment when we don't like the answers we get. Oftentimes with science, the answers we get are not the answers we want. So first off, we want to have the right attitude when approaching a puzzle or problem we are trying to solve. We need to be confident while also being realistic. Things like fear, stress, and insecurities will consume your mental resources, which will bog down our brains. Every thought takes up resources, and those resources are finite. You may have to find your own method for conquering these issues, but I will tell you what works for me. First, I learned a rigid strategy to apply to this process. That way, I wasn't just winging it. That helped with my confidence and/or insecurities. As for fear of failure, it's all about how we choose to perceive that. Rather than view a failed hypothesis or wrong answer as a loss, perceive it as a success in ruling out a possibility, one step closer to understanding. Here's more perspective. For example, people die every day. That is something that really matters to most of us. And failing to figure out an answer to a more trivial puzzle or problem is petty in comparison. Additionally, fear of failure is not logical. What do we get from fearing failure? It prevents us from trying in the first place, usually. Don't try, and we have created a self-fulfilling prophecy that ensures we will never succeed. I perceive pessimism in the same way. So as for removing or preventing harmful habits, there are a few things we need to do all at once. The most important is to have the ability to identify when we don't know something. If we can't do this, then we fail to identify the right questions that need to be asked. If we don't identify the right questions, then we will not be able to identify what we need to research. It's all about the right questions. Something that comes along with this ability is we need to dissociate from our egos. Don't relate failures of knowing, the feeling of challenge of understanding, or the success of solving the puzzle to winning. Additionally, people often have a tendency to want to debate before they have an understanding of an issue. Despite that want to make it a game, and despite the fact that that's what most people tend to do, we actually need to avoid debating, perhaps entirely. I know people have been trained to think that debating is a reasonable discourse for critical thinking, but I have plenty of evidence to disprove that assumption. It's not like you came up with that. Somebody handed it to you or shoved it down your throat before you had the ability to think for yourself. I will make a dedicated video explaining that concept in the future. So for those of you who want to debate with me about how useful debating is, just save it for that video, and I will entertain your want to debate in the forums under that video, or make a video addressing all of the extremely common responses I get to that situation. Lastly, removing bias. Oftentimes, I have observed people will insert a hypothesis that sounds really cool, profound, interesting, and it serves some misconception they have, usually defending their ignorance, therefore also related to ego, or serves to support the way they want something to be, usually naivety or idealism in this case. They become disappointed when the evidence does not support their hypothesis. They then associate that with losing, and their ego takes a hit. A product of sports-driven mentality brainwashing. Again, a subject for another video. We must not get pot committed either, or be a dog with a decomposing bone. Let it go. Otherwise, we risk a fate of self-deluding confirmation bias. Rather than presuming the value in advance, we must allow for an arrival at the answer. Another tip: every time we arrive at an answer or discover we understand what a piece of evidence means, allow that aha moment to be associated with a win. The last thing I would like to make clear before we move on is that the fact of the matter is almost always more complex than we would like it to be. Attempts to simplify will result in failure to understand. This tendency to simplify is very naive and only serves mental laziness. It takes a tremendous amount of energy to be able to make a claim that we truly understand something. This is why we have a tendency to fill in the blanks with an opinion and then not research anything. I outlined a bit of this concept in the Emergent Consciousness video for Tier 4. Hopefully you're watching this before you watch that, but you can look forward to more explanation of this when you get there. Okay, a recap of what we've learned so far. Be confident by being prepared, and be realistic by dissociating from self to escape ego. Properly associate your concepts of winning with productive facets of the thinking process. Identify what we don't know. Ask the right questions. Identify what we need to research. Carefully analyze our evidence. Understanding takes a lot of effort and the answers are complicated. Don't simplify. Have a coping mechanism for dealing with disappointments. Also, have a coping mechanism to deal with information that makes you feel uncomfortable in general. Use perspective to conquer all of this. Okay, congratulations, you're one step closer to becoming a Thought Jedi. Thank you for watching, joining the Thought Revolution. Thank you for subscribing, sharing, and thumbing up. Up next, Part 2, Efficiency and Evidence-Based Reasoning.